समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है, अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Hi, and thank you for watching this episode of The Print Security Code. Before we begin, I'd like to make an appeal requesting you to consider taking a subscription to The Print. The Print's granular analysis and high quality on ground reportage has long won the support of viewers and readers like you. But quality journalism costs money, and that's why we need your support. Subscriptions to The Print come with a host of benefits like Ask Me Anything sessions with senior editors, newsletters, an ad-light browsing experience, and even a chance to contribute your views to our Your Turn pages. The stars he might have complained conspired to cheat him of his destiny. Late in the summer of 1852, the great astrologer, chess player, and poet Mumin Khan ignominiously fell from the terrace of his home, and instead of becoming a martyr for his faith as he wanted, he was quietly buried in the cemetery just up the road from where we're shooting this, behind what is now the Maulana Azad Medical College in New Delhi. For many years, Mumin had worshipped mainly at the shrine of Venus, his lifestyle manifesting itself in charged erotic verse. Then, a great jihadist movement began to arise in India's northwest, and Mumin, the until then debauched poet, yearned to join it. God, make me worthy of martyrdom too, he wrote. Make me worthy of this highest of all forms of worship. Last week, a suicide bomber ripped through Friday prayers at the Darul Uloom Haqqani cemetery at Akora Khattak, the ideological cradle of Pakistan's jihadist movement. Founded at the site of the jihadist mystic Sayyid Ahmad's triumph over the army of Maharaja Ranjit Singh's Sikh army in 1826, 199 years ago, the seminary was soon to celebrate the second centennial of the battle. Instead, Darul Uloom Haqqani finds itself under siege from the very forces it helped give birth to. The target of the bombing was the seminary's head, Hamidul Haq Haqqani, who had been mediating between Islamabad and the Afghan Taliban factions. He sought, along with the Pakistani state, to marginalize the anti-Pakistan jihadists of the Tehreek-e-Taliban and the Islamic State. Even though no organization has claimed responsibility for the killing, online groups sympathetic to the Islamic State have been exulting. The Darul Uloom Haqqani counts among its alumni the pillars of the jihadist establishment. Sirajuddin Haqqani, the architect of the Taliban suicide bombing campaign, his slain former boss Akhtar Mansoor, and Al-Qaeda's former regional head Sanaul Haq are all graduates of the seminary. And for precisely that reason, newer jihadist formations including the Islamic State and elements of the Jamaat-ul-Ahrar and the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan see what it's doing to mediate with the Taliban as an act of treason. The long story leading up to Hamidul Haq's assassination began with the battle that took place just a year short of 2 centuries ago. Late one night in December 1826, 900 men made their way along the Londe, as the Kabul River is locally known, and tore into the camp of the Sikh commander Budh Singh. The attackers, some 700 of them followers of the Akora Khattak tribe chieftain Amir Khan Khattak, together with 100 volunteers from Kandahar and another group from the plains of Bihar and Bengal, used insurgent tactics. Their attack led Budh Singh to fall back towards Shaidu near Attak. For the largely untrained jihadists of Sayyid Ahmad, this victory must have seemed a sign from God. Historian Mumin Khan notes that in a letter written soon after the victory, it opened the floodgates for new volunteers drawn from the ethnic Pashtun communities living along the Londe. Leaving India as a partition refugee, the cleric Abdul Haq Akorvi founded Darul Uloom Haqqania in 1947 at the very site of that battle. He hoped to bring to the Afghan-Pakistan borderlands the values of the great seminary of Deoband, where he himself had studied. Abdul Haq's leadership saw Darul Uloom Haqqania emerge as the region's preeminent theological institution. The scholars Don Rassler and Wahid Brown note that from 1966 to 1988, 1/3 of all Pakistani clerics of the Deoband Theological School graduated from this single seminary. The seminary also became a hub for the jihadists who streamed into Peshawar around that time, using the city as a base for fighting the left-leaning government of Afghanistan's Premier Daud Khan. From 1973, the Inter-Services Intelligence Directorate began arming and training Afghan Islamists through Brigadier Nasirullah Babar, the Inspector General of the Frontier Corps. This war would travel a strangely similar path to the first one, from euphoric religious frenzy to despair and death. Long cocooned inside the mystic world of the four great Sufi orders and given to visions and trance states, the consequence of his epilepsy, colonial detractors claimed, Sayyid Ahmad slowly concluded the defense of Islam needed more than piety. In the early 19th century, two great powers, Imperial Britain and the Sikhs, had captured swathes of what Sayyid Ahmad considered to be the lands of Islam. For a time, Sayyid Ahmad contented himself with proselytizing for his order, the Tariqa-e-Muhammadiyya or the Path of Muhammad, hoping to reform Islam's practice and the inner values of Muslims. Following a visit to Mecca for the Hajj pilgrimage in 1823 though, Sayyid Ahmad decided to follow the path of the sword. Together with his followers, Sayyid Ahmad chose to make hijrat or emigrate to the Afghan-Pakistan borderlands. He began a struggle to restore the rule of Islam over tribes living under Maharaja Ranjit Singh's empire. His caravan headed from Raebareli to Gwalior to Tonk, then into Sindh and through Balochistan to Kandahar. An extraordinary arc of thousands of kilometers made to avoid Sikh-held territory. The mystic had no knowledge of war though. Though he had served in the army of the Mughal warlord Amir Khan, Muinuddin Khan writes, his time there was mainly spent in prayer and contemplation, not learning the arts of generalship. Faith and treachery would collide at Akora Khattak, shaping the course of the battle to come. Leaders of the tribes in Kandahar had decided to join Sayyid Ahmad, some drawn by the idea of fighting the Sikhs, others by the prospect of loot from quick raids. Amir Khan Khattak, for his part, hoped the tribal militia as well as Sayyid Ahmad's Bihar and Bengal volunteers would help him crush a troublesome nephew called Khwas Khan. General Budh Singh, for his part, had some 5,000 trained troops and the support of the troublesome Khwas Khan, the police chief of Khairabad, and the ethnic Pashtun ruler of Peshawar, Yar Muhammad Khan. The first contact at Akora Khattak was not actually a significant battle. The retreat of this powerful imperial force, though, seemed to prove that God was on the side of the mystic. Fresh groups of followers began arriving from Bengal and Bihar to make up the ranks of those lost in battle. Later, Sayyid Ahmad wrote to the Emir of Bukhara, I quote, I have been commanded to raise aloft the word of God, to revive the Sunnah, that is the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, and to eliminate the rebellious infidels. Following the Soviet Union's intervention in Afghanistan, more than a century later, the jihadists at Darul Uloom Haqqani also seemed to have divine support. Facing endless numbers of volunteers arriving from across the Islamic world, armed with massive material support from the United States, the Soviet Union flailed and then retreated, a superpower defeated by a ragtag army. Less than a decade after the war began in 1979, Darul Uloom's alumni network ruled Kabul. Abdul Haq's son Samiul Haq, who inherited the seminary in the 1980s, reaped the harvest of the services his father had rendered to the Pakistani state. Leading the Jamiat Ulema-e-Islam party, the largest political grouping of clerics, he made his way to Pakistan's Senate. The resurgence of the Taliban after the 9/11 war led ambassadors and high officials from around the world to make their way to Akora Khattak, hoping to persuade Samiul Haq to intercede with his Taliban students turned rulers. Like the Taliban emirate that rose from 1996, the little empire of Islam Sayyid Ahmad built from Panjtar to the Amb proved not to be the promised land. The mystic's religious beliefs, historian Aisha Jalal writes, ran up against local ethnic Pashtun custom. The local practice of bathing naked in the river was strictly prohibited. Violators were fined and lashed. The lands of those who had fled during the fighting were appropriated and handed to the Mujahideen, or holy warriors. The mystic himself once even entered a zanana, the cloistered space of women, to have one woman flogged for wanting to leave her husband. The resentments of the ethnic Pashtun tribes against the diktats mounted as they realized they had exchanged an imperial oppressor with another oppressor just as determined to impose his norms and codes over their fiercely independent highland communities. Encouraged by the kings of Chitral and Kawai meanwhile, Sayyid Ahmad decided to try and conquer Kashmir. This time though, things didn't work out according to plan. The ruler of Amb, Painda Khan, first declined to allow the jihadists to pass through his territories. The jihadists won one battle that followed, but Painda Khan then allied with the Sikhs to trap them in a pincer movement. Sayyid Ahmad's army was shattered and could move no further. Finally, in 1831, Sayyid Ahmad faced the Sikhs in a final battle at Balakot. That, of course, being a name you've heard of, where India bombed a Jaish-e-Mohammed seminary in 2019. Together with his closest follower, the mystic Shah Ismail, Sayyid Ahmad is said to have read out the Takbir, the declaration of God's greatness, and charged into battle. He ended up decapitated and his army was crushed. The Darul Uloom Haqqani, for its part, entered a long period of decline too. Even as the negotiations that would lead the Taliban back to power in Kabul began, Samiul Haq was stabbed to death, a murder that remains unsolved to this day. There have been dark hints that the killing might have been a crime of passion, linked to the unconventional sexual practices that led to the cleric being called Maulana Sandwich by his detractors. And even though the Taliban's triumph in 2021 should have given Hamidul Haq enormous influence, his position was soon undermined by the savage violence between the factions which took power in Kabul, as well as the fighting between the Taliban as a whole and the Islamic State. The stars, perhaps, who knows, had it right for Mumin. Today he is remembered for his beautiful poetry, and his desire for martyrdom may have only led him to a meaningless death. I'm Praveen Swami, and I'm a consulting editor with ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.